Hello and welcome to another episode of Work 2.0, the podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wells, and you may notice that the background for this podcast is a little different than what you're used to. That's because I'm no longer in St. Lucia for now. St. Lucia is still my second home, but I'm actually back in the UK, in my second home in the UK, just moved. So it's been really hectic right now. Recovering from jet lag, I'm still falling asleep myself. So hopefully I won't fall asleep right now as I'm talking. I have a habit of doing that, but no, seriously. So apologies for any acoustics, any just the emptiness behind me. It's not going to be this way for long. I'm just moved, so bear with. But that just tells you I'm really passionate about this podcast because I decided, regardless of what happens in my personal life, this interview today has to go ahead. I'm so excited to meet with Morgan Sanner, who's our guest on today's podcast, because I've actually been trying to get this interview date with you for a long time, Morgan. when they initially told me about you, Bethany and Sophia, and they're like, okay, let's get a date. And I think they had to change the date at least a couple of times because you must be fully booked or something. So I'm like, okay, we need to. So I wasn't going to let go of this date. I'm like, okay, this has to work. I don't care if I just move. We're going to make this work.
Yes. Fully booked and love to travel. So
right, yeah, cool. So Morgan, you are a resume writer. I know you're also a Glassdoor career expert. Tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
For those of us who don't know you.
I started working in HR back in 2017, so I have some HR experience at small businesses, large businesses, and because I was in my early 20s and people near or close to me, like my friends in college, constantly were asking for resume help because I had that HR experience. So I ended up working with them. I started working with Indeed.com actually as a resume reviewer. And I started to realize that again and again, I was giving the same pieces of advice. So I realized if I took to social media, I could reach more people with the same advice and hopefully not need to give so much of it one-on-one. So I spent a couple of years working as a resume writer with other agencies, and then 2 years into that, I started my own business. So it's been 3 years now.
Awesome. That's so exciting. That's good. So today we're obviously Work 2.0, the podcast. We always like to be future thinking, future focused. And that's what our global listeners are here for. They're here to find out about the future of work, about the things they're going to need to be prepared for the future of work. So today we're going to be talking about, I know you talk a lot about AI and in the workforce and when it comes to job seekers, what they need to know. And I get this question all the time, now that AI is the new norm, and we know that AI has been around for the longest when it comes to recruitment, as far as ATS is concerned, but now it's just become more, in your face. So what our listeners want to know, I think, is really how AI is used in the job search process and what are the things that they need to be aware of. So I think my question to you is, to begin with, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that job seekers have about how AI is used in recruitment? What do they need to know?
I think this is a very hot topic. Every time I make a video about this, it gets a lot of conversation going.
Yeah.
So I think one of the bigger things that people believe is that there's some AI robot making hiring decisions on behalf of people in human resources, which is not the case. If you're ever brought in for an interview or if you are hired, it is because a human saw you and liked you and met with you.
Wow. That's very reassuring.
Yes. I think a lot of people think that the end decision, who gets called in for an interview, that falls to some robot that it's just impossible to please, but that's not the case. It is a human person that likes your resume and brings you in.
So for example, we all know about ATS, which for those people who don't know is applicant tracking systems that essentially scan, pass through resumes. So obviously, like when a recruiter, when they don't have the time to go through all the resumes and they're looking at certain keywords, looking for certain candidates, the ATS passes and brings up the relevant resumes. Now, is it down to the decision of the ATS or the AI in a way? Because, well, after all, if your resume doesn't make it to the scanning, if you're not seen because you haven't optimized your resume for ATS, then hey, you're not going to be invited to the interview. In that sense, does AI control the process a bit?
In some ways. So if a recruiter were to search for certain phrases and let's say your resume didn't have those phrases, I'm thinking things that are critical to the job, because if I'm recruiting for somebody in program management, I'm not looking for Microsoft Teams. I'm looking for somebody with hard and fast program management experience.
Right.
So I think that's where people become really afraid of that searching and filtering capability. But to be honest, if some of those key phrases that they're searching for aren't on your resume, the person probably wasn't going to call you in either. So it's really important to have those phrases on there, both for the recruiter and for the applicant tracking system.
Right. So really the job specific skills. Yeah, Microsoft Teams is great, but Agile, Scrum, things like that. Yeah, the more specific ones. Yeah. Cool. So how can job seekers use AI to optimize their job search strategy and land their dream job? Because there's been a few research been done this year and last year, and I reported on it, I think, once when I was writing for Forbes. HR, and I know you've obviously got an HR background, so maybe you can attest to this. There's been some mixed feelings about the reception of when job seekers use AI. It's kind of like double standards, right? When job seekers use AI, HR and recruiters don't always like it because they can pick it up, they can sense it, they can smell it in the resume. Like, this was AI written. And sometimes it's looked upon with approval. Other times they're like, we would automatically turn you down if you've used AI in your resume. Like, so I'm sure there's it's not a complete all or nothing. I'm sure there's like some middle ground. So how can or should job seekers be using AI? And I'm sure the answer would be yes. So how can they use AI to optimize their job search and the assets that they create, like the cover letter and the resume?
I could get on a soapbox about this, but I think that there are a lot of great ways that you can use AI on your resume. One of my favorite hooks in a video I've ever made is you didn't get rejected because you wrote a resume with AI. It's because you wrote a bad resume with AI. Right. So you just need to know how to use AI in order to make a good resume. And I think some good ways to do that are kind of in the pre-work and then in the editing phase. So for pre-work, I like to say that you should have one resume per job title or like job family. So let's say digital marketing and social media management. You have 2 different resumes. You can scan quite a few different job descriptions to kind of get some market research on what key phrases are popping up in these. How can I build out this resume in a way that has those key phrases? So I think that's a great way to use it, to get a rough list of what skills you need to talk about. So that way you can start brainstorming what should go on the resume. And then in the editing phase, asking, are there any other metrics I can include? Is there anything that I missed? Did I spell anything wrong? Because sometimes you do. Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of using it as an assistant rather than using it to do everything for you.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. They'll go, ChatGPT, create a resume for me. This is the job I'm applying for. And then they literally copy and paste blindly. And half the time they're probably lying, and they're also filling it with a lot of robotic phrases and repetition. And, for example, this year, I always tell people, you should always write a resume or update a resume for yourself at least once a year, even if you're in a stable job or even if you're in a business and you don't feel you need one. You just never know. So this year I created a resume for myself, well, an updated one. And it was quite interesting because the last time I did it was when I was laid off a couple of years ago. So I updated my resume, and I've gained so much experience in my business since I was laid off because I'm a full-time entrepreneur. And I just thought, let me have some fun. So I put my experience through ChatGPT. And the initial drafts, I can tell you, if I went with that initial draft, I'd be very embarrassed.
Yeah.
That was from ChatGPT. I had to make some serious edits. It wasn't my personality. There was a lot of repetition. There was a lot of cliched phrases in there that it just didn't sit right. The output was good, like, when it comes to quantifying my experience, it did really well. But I had to change the wording to really make it fit my personality. Because when they see me and what they see on the resume, they're 2 different people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
For sure. So obviously a lot of people have anxiety about robots replacing recruiters. And you mentioned, I think you've kind of already partially answered this question, that there is a human still behind the scenes. Would you say human judgment still dominates the hiring process, or is that becoming less of a thing? Because obviously Indeed and Glassdoor, ironically, I know you're a spokesperson for Glassdoor, but we know that recently, a few weeks ago, there are some layoffs happening at Indeed and Glassdoor, and people are saying, it's because AI is taking over different aspects of the hiring process. So that was one of the reasons supposedly for the layoffs. So do you feel that AI will continue to dominate the hiring process to the point where humans are almost completely excluded from the recruiter side?
I sure hope not.
Yeah.
Both for human resources sake and also the candidate experience sake. I know I've seen those videos of people being interviewed by AI and it looks horrible. So
Yeah.
I hope that companies don't choose to go that route. I know a lot of organizations like to just because of the cost savings, but I think at the end of the day, for both the candidate experience and the organization experience, I hope that humans will still be the key decision makers.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah. I guess it will backfire if organizations decide to go 100% AI when it comes to, because, you know, you're not going to get the same quality candidates. I mean, interviews are already nerve-wracking. Let's not make it even more nerve-wracking by being interviewed by a robot. You know,
Yeah.
you can have some banter, some back and forth, some rapport building with a hiring manager, but you can't do that with a robot, with someone
Mhm.
you can't see. That's very nerve-wracking. And then you're being judged in your performance when you didn't perform too well because you were just super nervous, for no reason. So yeah, I hope that we continue to keep the human in human resources for sure.
Absolutely. I hope so too.
So, when it comes to using resume scanners or ChatGPT, can you share? I know you mentioned that we're supposed to like use AI as an assistant, before and after the process when it comes to editing. Are there specific tips that you can share on how candidates can make really smart, strategic use of AI tools without overusing them?
Definitely. I think the best way to do it is, like I mentioned earlier, finding those job descriptions and really doing market research. And then
Mm.
it flips back to you. So instead of you saying, what should I say for each of those skills based on my job title, you take your list of skills and think about what is the best example I have of my ability to use this skill. And then you can kind of start to draft out not even full bullet points if that seems too intimidating, but just examples of successes that you have had. And then you can
Right.
start to play with those and run those through AI.
Mm.
What I find with bullet points is that a lot of times people will just say, I'm a program manager, write me a resume. So then those bullet points are
Wow.
usually manage programs. Like they're very, very basic. And it reads like a job description, which is not what
Yes.
we can write the job description. We don't need to read it on your resume. We want to know about
Exactly.
you and what projects you've had success with.
Right. What did you achieve?
Hmm.
Yeah. I always tell people there's a big difference between like just listing a bunch of responsibilities. Like no one
Absolutely.
needs to
Yep.
see that. They already know. That's why they're hiring you. They need to see what did you do that was different to the next person in your role.
Hmm.
That's what really matters.
Absolutely.
And what do you think, obviously, again, with your background in HR, and I think this is something, I'm a little bit nosy, so I really want to know this. And I think a lot of our listeners want to know this. What's one thing that all people in your profession, recruiters, hiring managers, people in HR, they wish candidates would get this, they wish candidates would understand that currently job seekers are not getting? What is it, that one thing?
Ooh. I thought of so many immediately.
Okay, go
Um,
for it. Give me
I,
three. I want to know.
I think immediately the top two that stood out were that the format does not, I don't want to say it doesn't matter because when it uploads into an applicant tracking system, it is more convenient when it parses in. So for that reason, it's nice to
Yes,
use one column, keep it simple.
right.
When I see some of these really overly designed resumes with like pictures all over the place, I'm like,
Oh,
we're not asking for a portfolio.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
looking for a
yeah,
resume. It's boring for a reason. Keep it boring.
yeah.
Um, and I think the second one is that impact piece. If you aren't speaking to your impact and your ability to do your job extremely well, your resume is going to look like 90% of other people's because that is
Wow.
something I see on most of them. It is just responsibility, responsibility, responsibility. And we need impact and examples over all else.
I 100% agree. I did a resume review with someone just well, 2 weeks ago, I think. And I noticed I was saying to her the same thing. No, it was a guy actually. The same thing that I'm seeing in his resume, I'm seeing pop up in literally every resume review that I do. I feel like I'm repeating myself like a parrot. And I'm always
Mhm.
trying to give them something unique, some unique like advice for their resume because I don't want to sound like I'm copying and pasting, but I actually am because it's the same problem I'm seeing, which is the impact part. That's
Yep.
so important. I think we often undersell ourselves because, and a lot of people don't see it, that they just send their resume and it's because I'm used to seeing resumes, it's glaring at me like, hang on, you're really massively understanding yourself because all you're saying is what you've done, not what you achieved or how you did it. And the impact piece is so missing. And there's huge opportunity to do that if you're in a sales role, if you're in management or leadership or
Mhm.
projects. there's so many KPIs and figures everywhere that you can pull out just to prove the impact. And also, especially with AI, you can even point to how you've used AI in your role as well. And then that makes the employers see that, okay, you're very forward thinking, you're very innovative, you're tech savvy. That's so good. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And I guess another question, a side question from that would be, is there, because I know you mentioned resumes that are highly overly designed, like a portfolio. Is there such a thing as an overly boring resume? Like, have you ever seen a resume and thought that one needed a bit of work?
I wouldn't say that you can get overly boring. I think the simple templates are best. I will say
Right.
the ones that I use and the ones that I give people have a little bit of color and just a little bit of something to break up the page, just because a big, block of text is kind of hard to read. So
Yeah.
finding a way to like keep the reader engaged and keep their eyes where you want them. I think it's more almost about the marketing. You almost have to think of it like you're making a
Right.
sales flyer and like, what do you want them to see? So
Yes.
you probably wouldn't love a sales flyer that's completely black and white with a big paragraph in the middle. So
Totally. And just a bit of trivia. Two quick questions that I think a lot of people ask me, and I thought, well, being as we've got a resume expert on board, they don't just need to hear it from me, they can hear it from you. First question is, what's the best font to use in your opinion? I've seen Microsoft Word, they have a new font, which is Aptos, which I absolutely love. Would you recommend that, or would you say there's a better font out there that they should be using?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I can't even remember what I use on my resume template. I think I switch back and forth between Calibri and Arial. I do recommend. I can't remember what all of them are, but I think there's a core 7 fonts that I think are the most accessible to read. So if anybody has vision problems, want to take that into consideration and not choose anything that's very difficult to read. Especially with
and definitely not Comic Sans.
Definitely not Comic Sans.
And finally, also when it comes to, sometimes people like to include a hobbies and interest section. Is that still relevant? Do we still need to include that, or should that be left out? Or is it based on depending on the role, maybe making it tailored to the role?
I think it depends on the role, and I personally really like to see those, but I think unfortunately the majority do not. So some examples, I actually just had somebody, they were applying to REI, so a very physical athletic type of brand. So they had their interests on there, and I think it was skiing, and I can't remember, but they had a fun fact about hiking the Appalachia Trail. So I thought that was really interesting, and I think for a company like REI, from what I know about them, that seems like something they may be interested in. So if you have something really interesting that you think would resonate either with the company or with the recruiter, I think that can stay. But most of the time, unfortunately, I say no, even though I really like them.
Only if it's relevant. That's the key.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Morgan, for donating your time with us today. It's been awesome having this interview with you. Hopefully, it shed a lot of light for our listeners who are very, very anxious right now about AI. Rightfully so. I mean, AI is displacing jobs, it's overturning jobs, eliminating them, making them obsolete, and creating all sorts of new job titles as well. And in the process, it's making the job search so much harder. So it's like, ironically, AI is causing layoffs, but then now that you're laid off and now you're trying to apply for work, it's just making things 10 times worse. But now thankfully, you've shared some tips to help job seekers understand how they can actually jump on the back of AI and use it to really help them kind of boost their job search process. And I'm sure it's quite reassuring for them to know that actually there is a human behind it all. It's not all AI right now. And hopefully it will remain that way. Thank you so much for your time today. And for those of you who have listened to this podcast episode, maybe it's the first time on Work 2.0, the podcast. If you want to stay ahead of the future of work and ensure that you're future-proofed for what the next 5 years will bring, I definitely encourage you to follow Work 2.0, the podcast, on Apple, Spotify. In fact, we are on all the podcast platforms. So your favorite podcast streaming platform, go ahead and follow us, give us a rating, give this show a rating. Like this episode, you can feel free to comment, share your thoughts, and definitely please do share it with your coworkers and friends, because right now I think everyone is panicking, and Work 2.0 is all about getting prepared so that you don't need to panic anymore. All right, so I will see you in next Monday's episode. Take care and bye-bye.